One of the things I often get asked about is how to navigate politics at work. And the longer I work in my career and the more different types of organisations I work with, more I've understood that politics basically is everywhere, and it's more important that you understand how to navigate it rather than just wishing that it didn't exist. Although politics may always exist, it's really important that we try and manage the negative impact they have, both on teams and their morale, but also on the overall organisation and the achievement of objectives and goals. In this video, I'm going to talk about what causes team politics, but also what you can do to help navigate and neutralise them. And when I'm talking about politics, I'm not talking about the person who really annoys you because they never make the tea or like they chew really loudly. This is more about the dynamics and undercurrents that occur in most teams and organisations. Office politics, a bit like death or taxes, is kind of inevitable, as organisations are made up with different people with different personalities, different experiences, different ways of working and different preferences. Culture is often described as the way that we do things around here, and office politics is just a byproduct of this. Office politics often take place where clear lines of authority aren't enough to advance an idea or a objective. It may be that the use of soft power or social networks is needed to get something over the line. And often, office politics are as much about influencing and persuasion as they are about being on the right side of an issue. In most organisations, there are usually two types of power at play: hard power and soft power. Hard power is kind of the definition, so those are lines of command, they are roles, responsibility, governance structures. It's the way that the organisation sets itself up. And to make hard power work, it's usually through coercion and payment. So if you think about it, have you ever heard the expression like, that's above your pay grade, or that's not what I pay you for? Those are examples of hard power where basically we have definitions about who should do what, how they should do it, and that's either enforced through coercion, you have to do it, I've told you to do it, or that's what you get paid a reward for. Donald Trump was the epitome of hard power. That was very much about coercion and payment. In turn, we have soft power, which is the ability to attract or co-opt people on, and think about people like Justin Trudeau or Jacinda Ardern, who uses appeal rather than force as her leadership style. The chances are, if you're experiencing office politics at work, that's because the hard power elements have created an opportunity for the soft power or office politics to take hold. So utilising the soft power elements at your disposal will help you navigate the politics and take control. Gone are the days where there are corner offices and long lunches which symbolise where soft power was taking place, but now soft power is more about how things get worked out on a day-to-day basis within your office. In fact, if you think about it in terms more of office dynamics rather than office politics, it may help you to navigate it better. This doesn't mean that office politics are always negative or are something that need to be defeated, though old school styles of working may encourage you to think like that. Office politics are just a way of advancing a view or an agenda where clear authority does not exist. And if you use it to your advantage, you can expand the options of the ways that you can get what you want. There are four main things that you can do to help navigate office politics, and the first thing you can do is to pay attention. Before you think about tackling the office politics, think actually about how they're operating in practice in the team or organisation where you work. There are some ways which you can understand what's going on at a kind of cultural or organisational level. For instance, is your manager partial to doing things one way rather than another? For example, does your boss prefer discussing new initiatives in person, or are they someone who wants something in writing so that they can consider it and reflect upon it first? Has your company or team identified what its core values are, and if so, are they acted upon? Does your team reward short-term or long-term achievements? Is risk rewarded or discouraged within your team? Are people applauded or praised for taking risks, or are they shot down and told not to do that in the future? Do you understand how key decisions are being made, and more importantly, who makes them? By understanding who the influencers are in your team and who needs to be on your side may help you navigate those politics. In team situations, who speaks up in meetings and who is listened to, but also who stays quiet. So understanding the dynamics of perhaps who the more loud members of your team are, and people who perhaps sit back a little may understand again who those influencers are. How do your co-workers or team members interact? Is it like generally only on business matters and they don't do much social, or is it all kind of social interaction and no one really talks about the nitty-gritty of what you're doing? An imbalance either way may show that there's a bit of a cultural issue where they're keen to avoid office politics. And also, are there any informal social networks going on within your team? In some teams I've worked in, this has been super obvious because they've in effect been married couples or from the same family. And of course, there's always a dynamic there that you need to be aware of. So understanding perhaps any social networks, connections, or even how long people have worked together may help you understand where there might be a balance of power. And finally, are people more comfortable taking decisions by themselves in an autocratic way, or are they more comfortable by sharing decisions with the whole team in a committee? I know that in some organisations I've worked at, you could make decisions on the fly and it would be quite organic, or some other organisations I've worked in where everything has to be prepared and submitted in advance and no decision can be made without a written paper. So understanding how decisions are made and how people feel about that will also help you navigate some of the politics. Once you've taken all of that into account, you'll have a better understanding of how the politics is working within your team. And then you can start to identify the actions that you can take to align people. So if, for instance, we've identified that everyone wants everything in writing and there's quite a formal structure, that's how you'll need to advance your idea. However, if you've got a much more social office politics at play, and in fact you need to talk to lots of people one-on-one, get their buy-in before you want to do something and then launch it, then that will help to understand and perhaps avoid you irritating anyone or upsetting any office politics. Ideally, early on, you should be figuring out who your allies are, who's generally aligned to your way of thinking, your way of working, and perhaps those people who will naturally have your back in a group situation. This isn't about creating some dystopian Hunger Games type situation where all alliances have to be sworn in blood, but it's more about identifying those people who you naturally work well with and will have your back. So think more Elle Woods than Katniss Everdeen. The other tip that I found really helpful to help navigate some of the politics is often to bring in people from other teams or outside of your department on a project. By working with people from other teams, it may help to dilute any intra-team culture that you've got going on, but also bring fresh perspectives. Most people never want their own office politics played out in a very public forum, so you might find that people are on their best behaviour or revert to different ways of working. So you might find that by bringing in other people on a project may help you get what you want. The other thing to think about is about building relationships, and not just with those above you, but those at all levels of the organisation. This means, of course, by performing your job well and making your boss look good, but also bringing in the skills and expertise of other colleagues around you. By giving credit when it's due, it not only makes you look good, but also helps you encourage buy-in from more junior members of the team, and over time to help shift office politics and culture. Those techniques can be more effective in stable or static organisations. If you're somewhere which is like a fast growth organisation or somewhere where it regularly rotates teams, that might be more difficult. However, I think that building good connections is a good thing in both the short term and the long term. Most of us operate or work in industries which are, in effect, a small world, and word often gets around, be that good or bad about you. So by being a good colleague and building good connections is only going to put you in good stead. The third area is to build trust. Like any relationship, trust is important. Professional relationships have three main pillars, like trust and respect. An ideal relationship has all three of these things, but you can survive on just two. If you're down to one, then that's when in fact you may be in trouble or when office politics are starting to cut in. For instance, I've worked with some bosses who I liked and respected, but I didn't necessarily trust them to have my back in a professional setting or to back me up in a meeting. Alternatively, I've worked with people who I trusted and respected, but didn't particularly like on a personal level, but that didn't matter because we could get what we needed to done at work. It can be difficult for you to try and make someone like you, but it is easier to make someone trust you in a professional setting. According to the similarity principle, we tend to trust people who we think are more like us. So try to foster conversations and team building activities that bring out the similarities between your team rather than the differences, and that may help to reduce some of the office politics. One icebreaker I really like to do with my team is to get them to play bingo, where they have to share a fact about themselves and then everyone else who also has that fact gets to identify how similar they are. So that might be that you're a dog lover rather than a cat lover, that you're a beach person rather than a city person, but by bringing out similarities in your team, particularly about non-work issues, can help you build that trust. Again, another thing you can work on is warmth, and research shows us that warmth builds trust. Warmth, in effect, acts as a kind of social lubricant, particularly in a work setting. It can be as simple as a nod or a smile in a meeting, or just generally being supportive of other people and encouraging when they share their ideas. It shows people that you're paying attention to what they're saying and value their opinion, which in turn then builds warmth and trust between you. As an auditor, sometimes I have to give tough messages about things that aren't working or need to be improved. And I always say, you don't have to like what I say, but just the way I say it. And by building those relationships on like, trust and respect, it allows me to convey tough messages, but that are well received by the audience. Much of this comes from building trust and respect with your team to create that empathy and warmth. Finally, and this may seem odd in relation to office politics, but stay true to yourself. Often when we think about office politics, we think about it in a negative way because we feel like it's about being disingenuous or not true to who we are. And indeed, that's not the way to navigate your way through office politics. Be clear about what you want and what you need, but also be more open to the soft power ways that you could do to achieving those things. Navigating office politics with integrity is a good way to stand by your actions and your convictions. Be yourself and be upfront about what you'd like to see happen. Hidden agendas have a way of coming out and come back to bite you, so make sure that you're acting in line with your values and you can stand by what you're doing and how you're doing it. Once trust is broken in a team, it's really hard to get it back. Dealing with office politics may feel draining, but it is a game worth playing. It will feel negative for you if you get drawn into personal vendettas or confrontational situations. That's the dark side of office politics, and it can hinder employee engagement and also the overall success of the team. However, if you look at office politics as merely as the organisational framework that you need to navigate within, it will stand you in better stead. It isn't a minefield where you have to play dirty to succeed, but it is just instead a landscape that you need to understand and work your way through. That means paying attention to the situation that's going on around you and the factors that are at play. By listening rather than talking, you may be able to understand how best to influence the situation for the best outcome. Developing the skills to understand people, understand how organisations use hard and soft power, and also how best to use your influencing skills will stand you in good stead not only in the short term in resolving this situation, but longer term as your career develops. Most of us have experienced office politics in one way or another, and I'd love to hear about your experience below, either what did or didn't work for you. I'm Liz, and this is my channel Simplification, where we give you the tips, tricks and hacks to help you navigate your career.